In the cutthroat world of Manhattan law, Sarah Nelson's reputation for winning impossible cases made her untouchable. That was until a chance encounter with a mysterious janitor and his dying grandmother forced her to question everything she thought she knew about truth and justice. Little did she know, one simple act of kindness would trigger a chain of events that would shake the foundations of New York's most prestigious law firm and change her life forever. Sometimes the greatest deceptions come wrapped in the most innocent intentions. The afternoon sun filtered through the towering windows of courtroom 23B as Sarah Nelson rose from her chair, her navy blazer crisp despite the grueling 6-hour session. She faced the jury, her confidence masking the exhaustion of a 3-week trial. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady and clear. "My client didn't just lose his life savings, he lost his faith in the American dream." Her eyes swept across the 12 faces before her. Mr. Harrison trusted Pinnacle Securities with 30 years of hard work, and they repaid that trust with fraud. In the gallery, her colleague Rachel Chen watched with barely concealed admiration. Sarah had become legendary at Taylor & Brooks for taking on cases other attorneys deemed hopeless. At 32, she'd already secured more class action victories than partners twice her age. The jury's verdict was unanimous. As reporters clamored outside the courthouse, Sarah slipped out through a side entrance, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She'd learned early in her career that true victory didn't need headlines. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the hiring committee about reviewing associate applications. Sarah sighed, her shoulders finally relaxing as she reached the parking garage. That's when she heard it. A quiet sob echoing off the concrete walls. An elderly woman sat on a bench near the elevator, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her clothes speaking of simple but impeccable taste. Beside her stood a man in maintenance coveralls, his concerned expression genuine despite the shadows under his eyes. "Grandma, please," he was saying, "we'll find another lawyer." Sarah should have walked past. She had 3 client meetings, 2 briefs to review, and a stack of resumes waiting on her desk. But something in the old woman's dignified posture made her pause. "Is everything all right?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. The maintenance man turned, and Sarah found herself looking into the most startlingly intelligent eyes she'd ever seen. For a moment, something flickered in their depths. Recognition, perhaps. But it vanished so quickly she must have imagined it. "My grandson," the elderly woman spoke, her voice trembling. "He works so hard, but his employer—" She pressed a handkerchief to her lips. 3 months without pay, the grandson explained quietly. "The company filed for bankruptcy, but we know they're still operating under a different name." Sarah Nelson had built her career on reading people, on spotting lies and half-truths across conference tables and courtrooms. But as she stood there in that parking garage, she failed to see what was right in front of her. The subtle exchange of glances between grandmother and grandson, the way his calloused hands seemed at odds with his articulate speech, the too convenient timing of it all. Instead, she heard herself say, "I have some time now, if you'd like to discuss your case." Sarah found herself leading them through Taylor & Brooks' gleaming lobby, pointedly ignoring the raised eyebrows from the reception desk. The maintenance man, who had introduced himself simply as Grant, walked with a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with his worn work boots. "Miss Nelson," a sharp voice cut through the air. "The hiring committee meeting started 5 minutes ago." Rachel Chen stood by the elevator, tablet in hand, her Louboutins matching the red of her lipstick. Her eyes darted between Sarah and her unusual companions. "Push it back 30 minutes, Sarah replied, swiping her keycard. "Family law takes priority." Rachel's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose even higher. Everyone at Taylor & Brooks knew Sarah Nelson didn't do family law. She was the firm's star litigator, the one they brought in when corporations needed saving and class actions needed crushing. The elderly woman, Martha, she'd said her name was, settled into one of the client chairs in Sarah's corner office with the grace of someone used to much finer surroundings. Grant remained standing, his eyes taking in the wall of legal texts with surprising interest. 3 months of unpaid wages, Sarah began, pulling out a legal pad. Do you have documentation? Grant produced a carefully organized folder from his worn backpack. As Sarah reviewed the papers, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The documents were perfect. Too perfect, almost, for someone who supposedly couldn't afford legal representation. Your previous employer, she noted, Davidson Construction, they're not exactly small fish. Which is why no one will take our case, Martha sighed, pressing a hand to her chest. They say we can't win. Grandma, please, your heart. Grant moved to her side instantly. I'm fine, dear. Martha's voice wavered. I just want to see things set right before… She left the sentence hanging, heavy with implication. Sarah felt a familiar fire igniting in her chest. This was why she'd become a lawyer, not for the corner office or the astronomical billing rates, but for moments like these. Tell me everything. An hour later, Sarah sat back, her legal pad covered in notes. The case was complicated but winnable. Davidson Construction had a history of wage theft complaints, but they'd always managed to settle quietly, with the right strategy. I'll take it, she declared. We can't afford, Grant began. Pro bono. Sarah waved off his protest. Consider it my good deed for the year. Martha beamed, but there was something calculating in her smile that Sarah missed entirely. You truly are an angel. You must come to dinner. I insist. Sunday? Before Sarah could decline, her office door burst open. William Taylor III, managing partner and living legend, stood in the doorway, his silver hair and tailored suit radiating authority. Sarah, the Morrison merger. He stopped abruptly, staring at Martha with an unreadable expression. William, Martha's voice carried a hint of amusement. Still wearing that hideous tie, I see. Sarah looked between them, confusion evident. Grant seemed to tense slightly. Martha Taylor. William's voice was carefully neutral. I wasn't aware you were back in New York. Taylor, Sarah echoed, the pieces refusing to connect in her mind. Ancient history, Martha waved dismissively. Now, about that dinner invitation. Sarah found herself agreeing before she could process what was happening. As she watched them leave, Martha leaning on Grant's arm with perhaps a bit more theatricality than necessary. Rachel reappeared. Do you have any idea who that was? She hissed. William seemed to know her. That was Martha Taylor, as in Taylor and Brooks Taylor. She practically built this firm's family law division before retiring. They say she's worth $500 million at least. Rachel's eyes narrowed. What was she doing with a janitor? Sarah stared at the business card Grant had left behind. Something wasn't adding up, but a lifetime of legal training hadn't prepared her for what was really going on. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sunday, 7 p.m. Car will pick you up. Wear something nice. M. Outside her window, a town car pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted glass, she could have sworn she saw Martha Taylor smile. Sarah spent Sunday morning questioning her decisions. By afternoon, she was Googling Martha Taylor. By evening, she was standing in front of her closet, staring at her court suits and wondering what something nice meant when dining with someone worth $500 million. She settled on a black cocktail dress, elegant but not trying too hard. The car that arrived was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, because of course it was. The Taylor estate sprawled across 5 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut. Sarah's heels crunched on gravel as she followed the housekeeper through massive double doors. The foyer alone was bigger than her apartment. Sarah, right on time. Martha appeared, looking far more energetic than she had in the parking garage. She wore a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. Come, dinner's almost ready. No sign of Grant. Instead, a collection of what had to be original Renoir lined the hallway. Sarah's legal mind was screaming that something wasn't right, but before she could voice any questions, Martha clutched her chest dramatically. "Oh," she stumbled slightly. "These spells. They're getting worse. Should I call someone?" Sarah moved to help her. No, just help me to the dining room. Grant should be here soon." The dining room could have hosted a state dinner. Martha insisted Sarah sit at her right hand, then proceeded to grill her about everything from her career to her dating history. "Single, a brilliant lawyer like you," Martha tisked. "The men must be intimidated." "I'm focused on my career," Sarah replied diplomatically, wondering where Grant was. "Career is important, yes, but family." Martha's voice grew wistful. "You know, I always wanted great-grandchildren." Sarah nearly choked on her wine. "Mrs. Taylor, please call me Martha, or Grandma if you prefer." She winked. "Martha," Sarah corrected firmly, "about the Davidson case." "Oh, that." Martha waved dismissively. "I'm sure you'll handle it beautifully. Now, about my grandson." A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. "Grandma!" Grant's voice carried a note of panic. "What are you doing?" He burst in, and Sarah's jaw dropped. Gone was the maintenance uniform, replaced by a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit. His hair was styled, his presence commanding. He looked like he belonged in this mansion. "You're late," Martha chided. "Sarah and I were just discussing—" Suddenly, she slumped in her chair. "Grandma?" Grant rushed to her side. I'm fine. Martha's voice was weak. "Just my heart, the doctor said." She gripped Sarah's hand. "Promise me something?" Sarah felt like she was watching a play where everyone knew the script except her. "Mrs. Taylor, my grandson." Martha's voice trembled perfectly. "He works too hard, takes care of everyone but himself. Before I go, I just want to know he'll be taken care of." Grant's face went pale. "Grandma, stop this. Promise me," Martha insisted, her grip surprisingly strong for a supposedly dying woman. "Promise you'll marry him." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry," Sarah stood abruptly. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Please." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "The doctors say I have weeks, maybe days. My last wish—" "Grandma, enough." Grant looked mortified. "Miss Nelson, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was planning this." Sarah's legal training kicked in. "This is inappropriate. I'm your lawyer." "Actually," Martha perked up slightly, "the Davidson case was settled this afternoon. Full payment plus damages. So, technically, you're not anyone's lawyer anymore." Sarah's head spun. This was all a setup? "I prefer to think of it as destiny with a little push," Martha smiled. Then she clutched her chest again, more dramatically this time. "Oh, the pain." "Stop faking, Grandma," Grant sighed. But Martha's eyes rolled back and she slumped further in her chair. Her breathing became labored. "Grandma?" Grant's annoyance turned to concern. "Grandma!" Sarah was already pulling out her phone to call 911 when Martha's hand shot out to stop her. "No hospitals," she wheezed. "Just one last wish. Please." Sarah looked at Grant, who seemed torn between exasperation and genuine worry. She'd built her career on reading people, on spotting lies and manipulations. This was clearly a scheme, wasn't it? But what if it wasn't? "If I agree," Sarah found herself saying, "you'll go to the hospital." Martha's eyes lit up. "You'll marry my Grant." "Temporarily," Sarah qualified, her legal mind already drafting prenup terms. "Just until you're better." "Deal." Martha sat up straighter, all signs of illness vanishing. "I'll call Judge Patterson right now. He owes me a favor." "You can't be serious," Grant and Sarah said simultaneously. Martha was already on her phone. "Henry? Yes, I need a small favor. How quickly can you get here and bring your official seal?" Sarah looked at Grant, really looked at him for the first time. He met her gaze with a mix of apology and something else she couldn't quite read. "I'm Grant Taylor," he said finally, "managing partner of Taylor and Brooks' West Coast division, and, apparently, your future husband." Monday morning arrived with the subtle weight of a freight train. Sarah stood in the elevator of Taylor and Brooks, her finger hovering over the button for her floor. The events of last night felt surreal. The hasty ceremony in Martha's library, Judge Patterson's knowing smile, the way her new husband had whispered, "I'm sorry about this," before his grandmother practically shoved them into separate guest rooms. The elevator dinged and she stepped out directly into chaos. "Sarah!" Rachel practically sprinted toward her. "Why didn't you tell me? The whole firm is buzzing." "About what?" Sarah's stomach dropped. Rachel thrust her phone forward. There it was, posted on the firm's internal newsletter. Taylor and Brooks welcomes Grant Taylor as New York Division Chief. "He's been running the West Coast office for years," Rachel continued. "They say he's brilliant, ruthless in the courtroom, and now he's here." She paused. "Wait, wasn't he the janitor you were helping last week?" Before Sarah could respond, the elevator opened again. Grant stepped out, impeccable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Partners materialized from nowhere, swarming him with welcome messages and barely concealed ambition. Their eyes met across the lobby. For a moment, Sarah saw a flash of the same apologetic look from last night. Then William Taylor III appeared, clapping his grandson on the shoulder. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." William's voice carried authority earned over decades. "As you may have heard, my grandson Grant has decided to bring his talents back to New York, but that's not all we're celebrating today." Sarah's heart stopped. "It gives me great pleasure to announce that over the weekend, Grant married our very own Sarah Nelson." The silence was absolute. Then the whispers started. Did he say married? The janitor was Grant Taylor. She didn't even know who he was. Talk about sleeping your way to the top. Sarah felt her face burn. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Her reputation, everything she'd worked for. "A toast," Martha's voice rang out. She appeared from William's office, champagne flutes materializing with suspicious efficiency. "To the happy couple." Sarah accepted a glass robotically, her mind racing. She'd drafted the prenup herself. 6 months, ironclad confidentiality, clean break. She just had to survive until Martha's miraculous recovery. "Speech," someone called out. Grant cleared his throat. "Sarah and I," he began, then stopped, looking at her with genuine warmth that had to be fake. Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as simple moments. A chance meeting, a kind gesture. He raised his glass. "To my wife, whose compassion matches her brilliance." The applause was enthusiastic, if slightly confused. Sarah managed a smile that felt like a grimace. "All right, back to work, everyone," William announced. "Grant, Sarah, my office." The door closed behind them with the finality of a prison cell. "Well," William sighed, "this is certainly not how I expected you two to meet." "Grandfather," Grant started. "Save it. Your grandmother's already told me everything." William fixed them both with a stern look. "Do you have any idea what this could do to the firm's reputation if it gets out? A fake marriage? Our new division chief masquerading as maintenance staff?" "It wasn't his fault," Sarah found herself saying. "Your mother can be very persuasive." "Oh, I know," William chuckled. "Why do you think I moved the family business into law? Less dangerous than her matchmaking schemes." He became serious again. "But what's done is done. For the next 6 months, you two need to be the perfect couple. No hints of deception, no public disagreements. The firm's reputation depends on it." "And our case assignments?" Sarah asked, dreading the answer. "Continue as normal. Grant will oversee the corporate division, you'll handle litigation. Just..." He smiled wryly. "Try to look in love occasionally." Outside the office, Rachel was waiting. "Details, now." "Whirlwind romance," Sarah recited the agreed-upon story. We wanted to keep it private. Right. Rachel's skepticism could have filled the Atlantic. And the janitor thing. Grant likes to understand every level of the business, Sarah improvised. It's why he's so successful. Rachel studied her. You know what this means, right? Every female associate is going to hate you. Half the male ones, too. Grant Taylor is, well, just Google him. Sarah had multiple awards, record-breaking settlements, features in legal magazines. The man was a legend. Her phone buzzed, a text from Martha. Dinner tonight, family only, don't be late, dear. Another buzz, this time from Grant. I'll pick you up at 7, wear the green dress. Sarah frowned. I don't have a green dress. Check your office, came the reply. Sure enough, hanging on her door was a Versace gown in emerald silk. The price tag was missing, which was probably for the best. Oh my God, Rachel breathed. He's already buying you designer dresses. Maybe this is real. Sarah touched the fabric, remembering Grant's words from the toast. His performance had been perfect, warm but not overselling it, genuine without being saccharine. Almost like, no, this was a contract, nothing more. In 6 months, Martha would miraculously recover, and Sarah would go back to being just another partner track attorney. Her reputation could survive this. Probably. The dress fit perfectly because of course it did. If you're enjoying this story of love, deception, and redemption in the world of high-stakes law, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue with what happens next. The green dress wasn't the only surprise waiting in Sarah's office. A stack of case files sat on her desk, each marked priority in Grant's precise handwriting. Complex corporate mergers, the kind of cases that made careers or broke them. She sank into her chair, the silk of her new dress rustling against leather. The old Sarah would have dived into those files immediately, worked through dinner, ordered takeout that would sit cold and forgotten. That Sarah had built a reputation on dedication and brilliance, not marriage to a legal dynasty. A knock interrupted her spiral. Hey, superstar! Jessica Pierce stood in the doorway, designer briefcase in hand and perfectly styled as always. 10 years ago, they'd started at Taylor & Brooks together. Now, Jessica headed corporate law at a rival firm and dated Grant Taylor for 2 years. Jess, Sarah's stomach tightened. What brings you to enemy territory? Heard my ex got married. Jessica's smile was pure litigation steel. To my oldest friend, without inviting me. She closed the door. Want to explain that? Sarah had prepared for this conversation, rehearsed it mentally. Instead, she found herself saying, "It's not what you think." No? Jessica perched on the edge of the desk. Because what I think is that Grant Taylor doesn't do anything without a plan. The Janitor Act? Classic Grant. He pulls that somewhere new every time. Says it helps him understand the firm's real dynamics. Sarah kept her face neutral, but her mind raced. Grant had done this before. And now, Jessica continued, he's married to the firm's rising star, right before the biggest merger in Taylor & Brooks history. She leaned forward. Tell me, Sarah, did he mention the Morrison deal? The Morrison files sitting right there on her desk. Sarah's silence was answer enough. Thought so. Jessica's voice softened. Look, I care about you both, but Grant, he's brilliant, charismatic, and absolutely ruthless about getting what he wants. Just make sure you know what that is. After Jessica left, Sarah pulled up the Morrison merger documents. 300 pages in, she found it. A clause so subtle she'd almost missed it. If it went through, thousands would lose their jobs. Her phone buzzed. Grant. Ready for dinner? She looked at the dress, the files, thought about Jessica's words. Then she did something the old Sarah never would have. She grabbed her coat and walked out, leaving the files untouched. The town car waited downstairs. Grant sat inside, bow tie slightly crooked in a way that had to be deliberate. You didn't wear the dress." "We need to talk about Morrison." His expression didn't change. "Over dinner, then?" "Now." Sarah pulled out the contract. Page 324, the pension clause. This isn't a merger, it's a corporate raid. It's business. It's 3,000 families. It's what the client wants. Since when do you care what clients want? The words escaped before she could stop them. The Grant Taylor I read about fights for justice. The janitor I met helped workers get unpaid wages. Which one is real? Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Both. Neither. Does it matter? Yes, Sarah said quietly. Because your grandmother isn't the only one lying, is she? The car slowed to a stop. They'd reached the restaurant, one of those places where even the water probably cost more than her first car. Through the window, she could see Martha holding court at a corner table, gesturing animatedly to a group of socialites. She's not actually dying, Sarah continued, but this whole marriage scheme, it wasn't just her idea, was it? Grant's silence was confirmation enough. Why? He straightened his bow tie, and for a moment she saw behind the mask saw raw honesty in those eyes. Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is from the inside, and sometimes… He smiled slightly. You need a partner who reminds you why you wanted to fix it in the first place. He offered his arm. Shall we? Grandma's waiting. Sarah looked at him, really looked. The brilliant legal mind, the fake janitor, the corporate raider, the advocate for justice. Which one was real? Maybe they all were. She took his arm. The Morrison deal. We're fixing it. Already done. He produced a revised contract. Check page 324. The pension clause was gone, replaced with worker protections that would make a union lawyer weep with joy. When did you… While you were deciding not to wear the dress. His smile turned genuine. Ready to face the family. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Sarah and Grant established a rhythm. She would poke holes in his corporate deals. He would strengthen her class action strategies. Their offices, now side by side, buzzed with a synergy that had the entire firm talking. Martha's weekly family dinners became a battleground of subtle manipulation and unspoken truths. Every time Sarah thought she had the upper hand, her grandmother-in-law would clutch her chest and whisper something about not having much time left. Then came the Morrison board meeting. This is career suicide, Rachel hissed, watching Sarah prepare her presentation. You can't tell the board to reject a billion-dollar merger. Watch me. Sarah straightened her suit jacket. Chanel, another mysterious gift from Grant. She'd stopped questioning the designer additions to her wardrobe after the third attempt to return them ended with Martha's Oscar-worthy heart episode. The boardroom was packed. William Taylor III sat at the head, Grant to his right. The Morrison executives filled one side, their faces set in corporate stone. Sarah took her place at the podium, feeling the weight of every senior partner's stare. The Morrison merger, as currently structured, is legally sound, she began. It's also morally bankrupt. The room erupted. William raised an eyebrow. Grant's face remained carefully neutral, but she caught the slight upturn of his lips. Miss Taylor, Morrison's CEO interrupted, your personal feelings. It's still Nelson professionally, Sarah corrected. And these aren't feelings. These are facts. She clicked to the next slide. Your restructuring plan doesn't just eliminate jobs, it systematically dismantles communities. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out her case with surgical precision. The hidden costs, the human impact, the long-term consequences. With each point, she could feel the room shifting. There is another way, she concluded, nodding to Grant. He stood, smoothly taking her place. Our team has prepared an alternative proposal, one that maintains profitability while preserving jobs. He spread revised contracts across the table. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of ethical corporate law. The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison's CEO leaned forward. "This is unprecedented. This is Taylor and Brooks." William spoke for the first time, pride evident in his voice. "We don't just practice law, we shape it." He turned to Sarah. "Well done, both of you." The meeting dissolved into discussion groups. Sarah slipped out, needing air. She found herself in the partners' lounge, staring at the Manhattan skyline. "That was quite a show." Martha's voice came from behind her. She wasn't clutching her chest or looking faint. Instead, she radiated satisfaction. "Was this your plan all along?" Sarah turned. "Push us together, watch us change the firm." "My dear," Martha smiled. "I may be a meddling old woman, but even I couldn't have planned how perfectly you two would complement each other." "It's just business," Sarah insisted. "Is it?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "Then why did Grant spend 3 hours last night revising those contracts? Why did you wear his grandmother's pearls to the meeting?" Sarah's hand flew to her neck. She hadn't even realized. "The 6 months are almost up," Martha continued. "The prenup you so carefully drafted will let you walk away clean. Is that what you want?" Before Sarah could answer, Grant appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, the Morrison team wants to discuss implementation details." He paused, seeing them together. "Everything okay?" Sarah looked at him, really looked. Gone was the fake janitor, the corporate shark. This was just Grant, the man who left coffee on her desk every morning, who argued case law with her until midnight, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. "Everything's fine," she said, "just discussing the future with our grandmother." Martha's smile could have lit up Broadway. 6 months to the day after their hasty wedding in Martha's library, Sarah stood in front of Taylor and Brooks' board of directors. The conference room buzzed with anticipation. "As of this morning," she announced, "the Morrison implementation is complete. 3,000 jobs saved, profit margins exceeded projections, and our ethical corporate practice has brought in 12 new Fortune 500 clients." William beamed from his seat. Beside him, Martha dabbed at suspiciously dry eyes with her monogrammed handkerchief. "Which brings me to my next announcement." Sarah took a deep breath. "The 6-month deadline on my marriage contract expires today." The room stilled. Grant, who had been reviewing documents, looked up sharply. "I've prepared dissolution papers," Sarah continued, pulling out a folder. "Everything is in order, just as we agreed." She placed the papers on the table. Grant stared at them, his face unreadable. "However," she smiled, "I'm choosing not to sign them." Martha's handkerchief dropped. Grant's pen clattered to the floor. "That is," Sarah added quickly, "if my husband agrees." The silence stretched for 1 heartbeat, 2. Then Grant stood, walked to her side and did something no one at Taylor and Brooks had ever seen him do. He smiled, real and unguarded. "Motion to make the arrangement permanent," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Seconded," Martha called out, not even pretending to be sick anymore. "All in favor?" William asked, playing along. The aye was unanimous. Later, in their shared office, Sarah found a small box on her desk. Inside was a key not to a fancy car or summer home, but a simple maintenance closet. "For sentimental reasons," Grant's note read, "and because sometimes the best things in life come disguised as simple moments." Sarah smiled, tucking the key into her pocket just as Martha burst in, already talking about planning a proper wedding. "Don't you dare fake a heart attack to get your way," Sarah warned. "My dear," Martha winked, "I don't need to pretend anymore. I have exactly what I wanted. A brilliant granddaughter-in-law who keeps us all honest, and a grandson who finally found someone worth taking off the janitor's uniform for." Grant appeared in the doorway. "Ready for dinner?" Sarah grabbed her coat. Last season's, despite Martha's protests, some habits died hard. "By the way," she said as they headed out, "Rachel found the security footage of you practicing your humble janitor act. Very method. Had to make it convincing for the brilliant lawyer I was hoping to impress." You were trying to impress me? Still am, he smiled. Is it working? Sarah took his hand, feeling the weight of the maintenance closet key in her pocket. Every day. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about seeing someone's true self beneath all their carefully constructed masks and choosing to stay anyway. In the end, Sarah and Grant discovered what Martha knew all along. The greatest cases aren't won in courtrooms, but in the moments we choose to be real with each other.